Hello and good evening. Welcome to the special meeting for Tuesday, December 8th, 2020. And regarding at 6 p.m. here at the Wiggins, the purpose of discussing any and all business via in-person participation for the City Council, only remote participation for all others in accordance with Chapter 40A in Mass General Law and Governor Baker Emergency Order dated March 12, 2020. In accordance with Governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the City Council will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting is televised via Peabody Access Television. Real-time public comments during public hearings can be addressed to the City Council using the Zoom format, and this meeting is also being recorded by the court stenographer. I'll now turn it over to Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to receive items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I. Further move to take item H out of the Finance Committee where it had been previously referred and refer it to this proceeding. And further move under suspension of the rules to receive late communication dated December 8th, 2020 from His Honor the Mayor. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton.
Yes.
Sasslaw. Your microphone.
Yes. Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Just to receive, correct? Correct. Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you would request that the clerk read the notice to open the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn.
Notice is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Peabody will conduct a public hearing on Tuesday evening, December 8th, 2020 at 6 p.m. and conduct said public hearing in person, City Council only, in the Frank L. Wiggin Auditorium, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., and remotely via Zoom for all other public participation in accordance with Chapter 797 of the Acts of 1979 as amended of the Massachusetts General Laws in order to adopt the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property for fiscal year 2021. For remote participation using the Zoom platform, please visit www.peabodym.gov under City Calendar on the homepage or contact the City Clerk's office. Zoom information will not be available until the Friday before the meeting. Peabody City Council, Councilor Thomas J. Rozignol, City Council President.
Thank you, City Clerk Danforth. I'll now turn it over to the Mayor.
Well, good evening, Council. It's nice to be here with all of you to talk about our city finances and where things stand. Actually, it's not nice to be here with all of you to discuss this at this particular moment, but that's typically how I start things off. First, I do want to thank our finance team, our City Finance Director, Mike Gingras, our City Auditor, Mary Martin, our City Assessor, Sue Antonellis, who's here, along with our Assistant Assessor, Leslie George, the Board of Assessors. I see Attorney Teresa Reed on our screen. Our Board of Assessors have done a terrific job, and our finance team have put in a great deal of work over the last several months to try to work through the large issues that we've been dealing with, certainly, and I think it's very fair to say this has been certainly our most difficult year that I can remember in terms of city operations and in particular city finance. Let's get right into COVID. So the COVID-19 pandemic has upended so many aspects of our lives and created great hardship for so many people in our community, in our state, our country, and around the world. From those who have lost a loved one to COVID or who are dealing with illness themselves, to those who have lost a job or seen their businesses shuttered, to those struggling to work at home while caring for children, the effects of this pandemic have affected us all. And certainly, the effects of the pandemic have deeply affected our government operations. Despite layoffs, despite budget cuts across our city departments, and I can say pretty much every day, lately it's been multiple a day, we have somebody who works for our city that's been affected by COVID in some way, that's had to change our government operations to adapt to that and to try to help those people. That is a daily work that is taking place in addition to the government operations we're working so hard to move forward with. But despite all these challenges, we plow ahead. And I want to say that I'm extremely proud of our city employees for their hard work, their dedication, their commitment to their job, to keep our services going through these most trying of times, and to try as best we can to provide those essential services that our residents expect, but even more so, what our residents need right now. You know, the other day at a school committee meeting, we were talking about an important issue, and I spoke at that and talked about that. It's never been more difficult to be a police officer. It's never been more difficult to be a teacher in our country right now and during this COVID time and all the challenges we've been facing. And it's not just COVID, it's other challenges as well. But I could speak about all of our departments right now for what they're dealing with. Sharon Cameron, our outstanding health director, her team, Brenda Wolf, our nursing director, our health department, our nurses have just been rock stars through this whole process. The hours they're putting in, the information they're gathering on a daily basis, the phone calls they make, which is often very difficult news to deliver. They've just done a tremendous job, and they're being challenged like they never have before. Our custodians quietly do their work, and again, in very difficult circumstances, very grateful for all they provide, and certainly our police, our fire, our emergency personnel. What's been thrown at them over the course of these several months has just been amazing. They're all true heroes. And I could speak about City Hall, everything that's taking place here in school administration, across our city, people who are stepping up, covering for employees who are out, returning phone calls from departments that are shorthanded. It's just been amazing to see people helping out one another, and those challenges will continue. Our schools, I'm very proud of the fact that our schools have remained in hybrid up until this point. I'm pretty confident in saying that we are one of, if not the biggest school system that has been able to stay hybrid during the course of COVID. I felt strongly, and still do, that kids need to be in school, our students need to be in school as much as possible, safely of course, but they need that interaction with their peers, their teachers, and just being out and about and having some of that school experience. That was critical, and very happy to say that that's moving forward as best we can. Certainly been challenges, but right now our COVID cases have not been as a result of transmission through our schools. We'll be monitoring that, certainly have been every day, but right now our teachers have just been amazing, our administrators, principals, everyone right down the line is really going above and beyond. And even our staffs at departments that have been deeply affected and in part closed are functioning and helping our residents in many ways. Our library is every day doing curbside pickup for our residents to get them reading materials. Our park and recreation department are running programs and events for families and kids, which I know has been brought a lot of fun to people, and we're trying to find as many fun events as we can for families. And our Council on Aging, they continue delivery of meals, which is obviously extremely important, busing, a number of our residents to medical appointments and helping them with their needs. And we even have groups of people at Council on Aging who are just making phone calls to residents, some of our seniors, just to check on them and give them a word of encouragement. It's just really been amazing to see all the work that's taking place in our city. And again, I'm very proud of the work that's been taking place. But as you know, the economic impact of this pandemic has affected every level of government, with cities and towns hit particularly hard by revenue shortfalls and uncertainty surrounding state and federal aid. To account for this uncertainty, we faced, our finance team and I, outlined 3 different scenarios for the fiscal year 2021 tax levy during our budget presentation back a few months ago. And you may recall, we presented 3 different scenarios. The first scenario was kind of the worst case scenario, projecting a 15% reduction in state aid and a $2.6 million drop in local receipts. This projection required us to raise $115 million in property taxes, which would have been a tax increase of approximately $250 in that range. The second scenario was a middle-of-the-road case scenario, which projected a 15% decrease in Chapter 70 aid to education and a 1% decrease in unrestricted general government aid. This scenario required us to raise $113 million in property taxes and would have likely resulted in a tax increase of, I would say, approximately $160. The third scenario was our best case scenario at that time, which projected a $3 million influx of COVID relief funds, which would require us to raise $110 million in property taxes. Now, there is still a great deal of uncertainty that we face and some very difficult decisions which lie ahead. But we are very encouraged to see our state aid figures, which not only spared us the type of reduction we feared, but actually provided us with a $1 million increase, almost $1 million increase from last year. I want to recognize and thank our outstanding state legislative delegation for their advocacy on behalf of Peabody, Senator Joan Lovely, and Representatives Tom Walsh and Ted Spiliotis. Coupled with some better than expected local receipts, which include some calculated risks in terms of revenue projections, we will avoid the worst case scenario, which we laid out for you back a few months ago. Instead, our levy for fiscal year 2021 is $111.3 million. To achieve this levy, Mr. Gingras presented me a couple weeks back with a plan to draw $1 million from our reserves and increase the average annual residential tax bill by nearly $130, an amount in line with many of our neighboring communities. But if there was ever a year to lessen the burden on our taxpayers, I think we all agree that 2020 is that year. Certainly, our residents are struggling, dealing with so much uncertainty, trying to navigate their way through their lives as best they can. That is why I am proposing tonight a $1.5 million draw from the city's reserves and an average residential tax increase of $76. This is the largest draw from our reserve account in several years. This is Peabody's lowest tax increase in almost 20 years. It also represents the lowest tax increase of any of our neighboring communities. 40% of all of our taxpayers here in Peabody will see a decrease in their property tax bill. Our home values in Peabody continue to go up. This year we see a 4.3% increase from last year. The average home value in Peabody is $439,000, which is a record high and an increase of 30% from just 4 years ago. Again, this is the highest property value we have ever had in the city of Peabody. And in speaking to brokers, real estate brokers, our real estate market is as hot as ever, and properties continue to go above asking across our city. So some might say, why not dip further into the reserves? After all, they are meant for rainy days. It is our rainy day account. And that's a very fair question. After all, as all of us know and we've spoken, it's certainly raining harder than it ever has been. This is the biggest storm I think we've faced in many decades and maybe in our lifetimes. And I admit that I was very tempted to draw deeper from those funds and lessen further the burden on our taxpayers. But part of responsible governing is planning ahead. And unfortunately, these rainy days are going to last for a while. This is not a one-year crisis. If it was a one-year crisis, we could take a shot at depleting our reserves further, but it is not a one-year crisis. This is a multi-year, 2, 3, potentially longer financial problem for cities and towns. Local receipts, specifically hotel and meals, are likely to be down for the foreseeable future. And I think everybody was aware of the governor today making an announcement on further rollbacks in terms of activity, which is going to put further pressure on certainly all of our businesses, the North Shore Mall, all of our Route 1, Route 128 businesses, our restaurants, our hotels, all are going to feel the impact. The state has not certified our reserves yet and is allowing us to use last year's numbers, which adds just a great deal of uncertainty as to where we stand with our reserves and where they will look like a year from now. We need to anticipate the possibility that we may have to dip further into reserves to close out the fiscal year 2021, this fiscal year. And we still have $2.4 million in debt to be paid the next 2 years. We closed out 2020 with a $3.6 million debt. I think all of you are aware of that from discussions we've had over the last couple of months. The state, and Mike Jingles will be talking about this shortly, has allowed us to spread that debt over 3 years, 1.2 million, 1.2 million, 1.2 million. So if we go forward with the tax classification tonight, 1.2 million will be accounted for, but we still have 2.4 million that we have to pay over the next 2 years. And we expect significant debt this fiscal year as well. COVID numbers are the highest yet in Peabody. And although there is good news on the horizon in terms of vaccines, we still face many more months and possibly years of financial uncertainty. In speaking with Sharon Cameron, our health team, we had some meetings today, and our COVID numbers are astronomical right now. They're the highest they've been since March, since this first took place. And they continue to go up on a daily basis. And I feel that that is going to just continue for many months until we can get a better handle on the disease. For those reasons, I strongly believe that it is a fiscally responsible decision to hold the line at $1.5 million to draw down from our reserves. I think this approach offers much needed relief for our taxpayers while maintaining the fiscal prudence to see us through these difficult days and years ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Jingles and Mary Martin for their presentation, and I'm certainly going to be here to answer any questions. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to this discussion. Turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gingras.
Thank you. Let's see if I can share my screen here. Okay, so the mayor talked earlier about the increase in property values. This year, the total increase is $306.4 million, or 3.6%. Majority of the increase is from residential at 4.3%, and some the industrial, commercial, and personal pretty much held their own with a nice increase in industrial of 8%. These values are as of January 1st, 2020, right before the COVID hit. We're soon be into the January 1st, 2021, and the assessors believe that the residential values will hold and anticipate about a 5% increase going forward. This next slide shows the history of values. and the mayor alluded to earlier, over the course of the past few years, since 2016, values have increased 30%, over $2 billion. Almost incredible. This slide gives you a breakdown of the different types of residential increase, the total increase of 292.5 million or 4.3%. And you can see that the single families are at 3.8%, condominiums at 5.1%, 2 and 3 families at 6.5%, multifamilies at 4.6%, vacant land, value of lands increased to 12.1%, for a total of 4.3%. This next slide is our CIP values. They've increased 13.9 million, just under 1%. They've held steady, and as you see on the middle line for industrial, that went up significantly, 8%. And speaking to the assessors, there's been a real need for warehouse space, and they've been selling at a premium. So that accounts for a lot of that increase. This slide, and the mayor alluded to earlier, is the average residential value has increased to 439,000. That's just over 4% from the prior year. And it's steadily been increasing over time. This is the charts for the commercial, industrial, and personal. Again, they've increased slightly, pretty much remain steady. But we expect this to drop off with all of the effects on the economy from COVID and closures in the hotel and retail and restaurant industry. This is going to be a real moving number that we're going to have to keep an eye on. An area of good news is our new growth came in about 300,000 higher than our average. It came in at almost 1.4 million, where their average is 1.1 million. And that brought in 386,000 in new residential taxes and just over $1 million in new commercial taxes. 72% of the growth is in commercial industrial, 28% in residential. This next slide looks at the budget and how we would fund the budget. So this year we took a great effort in looking at the budget and reducing it. And the budget itself went down almost 1.2%. There was a slight increase in North Shore Essex Tech of 55,000. The other amounts to be raised, 762,000. This is the deficit for the general fund and for the skating rink. I've been working with the Department of Revenue, and I'm not 100%, but I'm very, very confident that they're going to take into consideration for our water and our golf course that we have enough revenues that are coming in during FY21 to offset the shortfall from FY20, so that we won't have to raise that on the tax recap sheet. And hopefully that will be the case. Tonight I'm going to be asking for a vote to defer taxes up to the 1.2 million, but in this presentation we're using 762,000. The next line is state and county assessments. They went up 120,000. And because of all of the uncertainty with the retail and commercial, I've increased the allowance for abatements 100,000 to 500,000. So the total amount to be raised is 161,634,989. We'll fund that through property tax levy at 111.3 million, local receipts at 17,750,000. The real saving grace here is the state aid came in at 31,060,031, and it's actually $2,000 higher because on Friday they finalized the conference committee and Peabody received another couple of $1,000. And then the free cash funding from reserves at 1.5 million balances the budget at 161,634,989. Overall, it's a 0.5% decrease from the prior year. This next slide is a look at the local receipts. Motor vehicle, we stayed on pace with what we received last year. Hotel, motel, really soft and unpredictable. We collected 1.34 million in hotel taxes. We're using $1,010,000. That's a 30% reduction. For the meals tax, it's 1.3 to going to $1 million. That's a 25% reduction. The 470, the next line, interest, fees, and taxes, we've already received the 470. So I was able to put that in. And part of that had to do with the sale of a property with back tax interest on back taxes. The next line with the major change is landfill revenues. We're looking at potential landfill revenues to increase in the spring. There's been some inquiries. There's been some new permitting. So we're hopeful that that number will hold. There was a slight bump in the rec revenue. We bumped that up 25,000. But for the most part, all of the other line items are staying within what they came in at the prior year, for a total of 17,750. So there's a couple of risks here at the hotel and in the meals and in the landfill. This chart takes a look at the state aid year to year. We received 31,060,000 in total compared to the 29,900,000 of the prior year. But there was an increase in the assessments by 100,000. So the net amount goes from 26,695 to 27,681. It's almost $1 million increase. It's going to be, at the end of the day, 988 because of the extra couple of thousand that we received on Friday. This next slide takes a look at tax classification. We're recommending the 175%, and at that classification, the tax levy of 111,324,000 is divided 74.8 million to residential and 36.5 million to commercial. Without that shift, it would have been 90.4 million in residential and 20.8 million in commercial. That's a $15.6 million shift, which represents just a little over 14%. A number of years ago, we were at 15%, and this keeps declining because the values of the residential are increasing at such a high pace compared to the commercial and industrial that shifting just doesn't account for it anymore. With that, the shift will save residents $966, and will cost commercial and industrial additional $14,660 on average. This slide shows you a history of the tax rates. Tax rates have gone down consistently each year, basically because the revenues have, the values have gone up. It's an inverse relationship. When values go up, tax rates go down. When values go down, tax rates go up, generally speaking. For this year, we're recommending a tax rate of $10.49 for residents and $22.20 for commercial. This next slide shows the annual homeowner bill. Average residential bill will go from $4,530 to $4,606. It's a $76.30 increase, or 1.7%, although the values went up about 4%. This slide is the commercial, same idea. On the commercial, their value increased slightly, and they're on average will have a decrease of $745, going from an average of $34,966 to $34,221. This slide is the breakout of the change in the tax bills, and the mayor alluded to this earlier. Approximately 40% of residents will receive a tax decrease. All those that have an increase, 70% will have an increase of $150 or less. And on the commercial side, the 78% of the parcels will see a decrease. This slide compares Peabody and Essex County. You can see that we're still really at the bottom of the list when it comes to average tax bill. In Methuen, Peabody, Lynn, Salisbury, Haverhill, we're all within a few dollars of each other in terms of an average single family tax bill. And then when you look at the very bottom line, you'll see that our average residential tax bill that includes condominiums and 2 and 3 families is $4,607 compared to last year where it was $4,530. And then if you look at the very far column, the excess levy capacity, Peabody's at 12 million during FY20, and in FY21 will be at 16 million. And you look at all the other communities and you can see that they've taxed right up to their limit for the most part. There's a few of us that have some reserve capacity that haven't taxed right up to the limit, but most of the communities in Essex County are right there. They could not tax anymore if they wanted to, without an override of Proposition 2.5. So in summary, the recommendation is to have a tax levy of $111,324,958. Use the residential factor of 175. The residential tax rate would be $10.49, and our commercial rate would be $22.20. In our unreserved, our levy reserve, the amount of money that we would not have taxed this year would have been $16,000,007. Under Proposition 2.5, we could have put through a levy of $127,332,000.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Gingras. Before I go to the council, there are 2 attendees. At this moment, I would like to see if those attendees would like to speak via the Zoom platform. If so, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands raised, I'll now open it up to the council for discussion regarding the presentation. Councilor Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Through you to the mayor, thank you very much for this presentation, Mr. Mayor, and your staff. Mayor, you had mentioned that there was some risks that you had, was this option the option with the risks that you were weighing? And if so, what were those risks that you were weighing?
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Good question. So the ones we really delved into were hotel, meals tax, and landfill revenue. Those were the ones that we really wanted to examine to see if there was some risk that we felt comfortable taking. The first quarter for meals tax came in about, revenue that came in for meals tax was under $250,000. That kind of put us in line with the 1 million. However, with these rollbacks and the way things stand right now, we were worried about taking more of a risk, so we kept it at 1 million. As well as hotel tax, we felt a 25% cut. But we really looked in to see if we could bump those numbers up. We just didn't feel comfortable. We did feel comfortable with the landfill revenue. Based on calls we've been getting and some permits that have been received, that we could bump that up from 200 approximately up to 500. I'm always hopeful for more. I think there's really a market for it. Just right now, everything's just been put on hold, but it's starting to trickle in the calls. So we felt comfortable going up to 500 on that, but those were really the ones we looked at.
Councilor Melville.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Mr. Mayor. I can tell you that the hospitality and restaurant business is obviously going through a tough time, and I think that I think even the numbers you provided are aggressive, even with the cuts. But I think that there's a possibility that we could get there. We still got 6 months left in FY21, so we could go from there. With regards to the commercial, this might be better for Mr. Gingras, through the chair to Mr. Gingras, but we're maxing out what we can tax on the commercial side, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're at the 175. That's the max we can shift.
Okay, thank you. And I think this, frankly, was a great presentation. I appreciate the clarity. Every year, I say the same thing since I've been on the council, that you definitely provide the numbers. Just from my perspective, within seeing Peabody and just with what's going on with the economic conditions, I think that the trend of our residential values continuing to exponentially go up versus whatever our commercial values are is going to just continue. I think that there's going to be a post-COVID a move towards the suburbs. I think Peabody is actually in competition with not just our neighbors on the North Shore, but on the South Shore for businesses, for commercial space, the businesses that might be downsizing from Boston, and then also their employees that want to move to Peabody. So my only concern is that I just see that the continued move towards the residential side is going to, sooner or later, we're not going to have those reserves that we can go to every year. And I think this, by the way, I think this is actually definitely prudent, the way you're handling it this year, Mr. Mayor, with the reserves. This is definitely what the rainy day fund exists for. It's absolutely appropriate. But using this great graph and data that Mr. Gingras put together and his staff, I think will be helpful looking forward at some of the quantitative differences that we'll see next year moving forward as we get out of COVID. Because this is going to be a new economy after we get out of this, I think, in a lot of ways. So I appreciate all the information, and I'll let the rest of my fellow councilors speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the staff for putting together this presentation. It's an excellent presentation, very clear, easy to understand. Tax classification is always the step after the budget. We set the budget, what month is it? 6 months ago or so, and then tax classification comes, and that's when we have to pay our bills. So we set the budget, and then tax classification decides on exactly where we're shifting the cost. And we are at 175%, as Mr. Gingras explained. Mr. Gingras, were we at 175% CIP last year as well? We've always
were.
been very close to that.
No, we were last year at
Once-
175.
We were at 1.75. Do you recall the year before?
Just under 175.
Yeah, so we have been, and you know, the businesses have certainly taken a hit, as have residents in the city during COVID, and we have been leaning heavily of the last couple years on businesses, so to the homeowners, we are leaning on the businesses again in order to give the homeowners a break. And the businesses did have a rough year as well. So just for those, you know, following along at home, I just wanted to point that out, that we all are in this together. So I had a couple of other questions for on this presentation, Mr. Gingras. On page 10, the Medicaid reimbursements, we never have been able to seem to get back to the amount that we had been collecting. Back in 2017, we collected $850,000, and it has dropped in half and has consistently since then. So we're down to collecting for revenues for Medicaid reimbursement, $390,000. Why is that?
I think traditionally we were in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. I believe that year where we received $850,000, we didn't get monies that were due to us from the year before, so it's an anomaly, and it's not what we would normally get. And with schools being in flux and the reimbursements that have to be put through, I thought 390,000, you know, was in line with what we did last year. We're hopeful that we would get more. And the schools are the ones that, you know, they go through and submit all the applications and do all the work on getting these reimbursements. So yeah, that's pretty much the explanation.
Okay, thank you. And so, and you followed up answering my next question, which is that the school department is still those that are responsible for really filling out all the files and the paperwork and collecting all that reimbursement, correct?
They work with an outside firm, but they generate most of the data, and then they have assistance, I think, through the University of Massachusetts to do it.
Okay, so they provide the data to the vendor.
Right.
And who oversees to make sure that we're getting all our reimbursement?
I would say the school business manager.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, the skating rink was short $78,000. Was it short last year as well?
The skating rink's been in a difficult situation where they've opened and closed and opened and closed. And last year, when we closed out at June 30th, there was a $111,000 deficit. When we set the budget in June, we knew that we would have to supplement their earnings with $78,000. So that's going to be the request and vote tonight, just to subsidize their budget based on what we voted for in June. I would expect that it's in such a flux situation that we would have to address this, the skating rink, and our own city finances going towards the end of the year in May and June, and take care of any deficits that occur, whether it be snow and ice, overtime issues, school issues, and basically save these reserves that we have and use them at that time, so that we don't have another deficit going forward that we have to deal with in the future years.
Thank you. So the skating rink has been opened, it's been closed, it's been opened, it's been closed. So they haven't had revenue to meet their budget for $78,000 because they've been closed, correct?
That's correct.
So what's the downside if they haven't been opened? What do we need the $78,000 exactly for, other than to just balance the budget? And I ask that because I know that the library is also, I think the skating rink, was pretty much level funded last year, but the library took a reduction of, 17% last year. And I think they're coming in, because I know all of us have received communication from the library that their certification is in jeopardy. And I know that this is probably the third year in a row that has happened. And the previous 2 years, we've been able to work it out and figure out how to get the library the certification. So I guess I'm wondering why the $78,000 being proposed to go to the skating rink as opposed to $78,000 going to offset the deficit in the library? What's your rationale for that?
When we set the budget for the skating rink, we had a built-in subsidy. I think I spoke at the time that we would need to cover approximately $100,000 because the estimated amount of revenue that we needed to meet the budget that we adopted wouldn't cover it.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to respond to that question as well?
Yes, that's a very good question. I do want to speak to that. And I actually meant to speak about this in my earlier remarks in terms of the library, because I think all of us have gotten calls, and there's a great deal of information that's put out there. And certainly I just want to make sure it's very clear that the library faced budget cuts just like every department in the city. Our Park and Recreation Department was cut 16%. Our Council on Aging was cut 16%. Library was cut 17%. Police was cut 7%. Fire was cut 6%. And that's just a handful. I can get much deeper in terms of building inspector and city offices here at City Hall. So the library, just like every other department, because of the circumstances, we had to make these tough decisions. And I will say that not one person at the library, not one full-time person lost their job. All full-time people at the library have kept their job. The reductions were in part-time work because the library right now is just not open besides curbside pickup. But I will just say that every year it's a struggle, certainly, to fund these departments. I, like all of you, take a great deal of pride in our library system. We're one of the very few in the state that have 3 libraries functioning here in our community, which I think is a great source of pride for all of us. It's really a jewel of our city. They do so much work. We have a terrific group of library trustees, and we've been working very hard. We just had a meeting a couple days ago with the library trustee and our library administrators, and there is no way we are going to lose that certification. We are looking at a couple of funding mechanisms, but we may be coming to the City Council for some additional funds to take out of free cash, but we are not going to lose our certification. We have applied for a waiver. This is the first time we've ever done that, just based on COVID reasons, and I know a number of other cities and towns have done the same, requesting waivers because of the extreme circumstances of this year. If we get it, that'll put a 1-year hold on it. If we do not get it, I will be coming back to the City Council. That would have to take place in February, March, but there is no way we're going to lose our certification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad to hear that. Again, we're all in agreement that the library is a crown jewel of the city, and George Peabody, our namesake, certainly left a majority of his money to fund and libraries across the state and country. And so I'm glad that we respect the gift that's been given. I know that we do. And again, we cherish our library. And I also recognize that many of our departments all took hits across the board, some more than others, but my concern, which I believe is shared, is that when the cuts that the library received, if they amount to a threat or any jeopardizing their certification, then that may be a time when we just want to reflect, as we have, as I said, every year, to take a look at that situation and come up with the funding. So I'm glad to hear Mayor Betancourt commit to finding that funding and that we won't risk losing a certification. But I do believe that the $78,000, if it's before us this evening, I would rather direct that to offset the library's shortfall as opposed to the skating rink. I would choose, if I must choose, the library in this situation of losing the certification in an effort to, find the funds for that. I would opt for that over the skating rink. And in addition, I think you might have touched upon this, Mr. Gingras, that our golf course, I think the bond is up pretty much any day now, isn't it? And wouldn't, once we're done with the bond for the golf course, be able to offset the skating rink's deficit? Wouldn't we be able to do that with the amount of money that should be coming in from the golf course?
The golf course, debt service is paid for. The golf course is now making money. We're looking into a way to be able to utilize the revenue from the golf course for other funds like the skating rink. And that's something we're going to look into before the next budget. And maybe we're going to do some changes to the structure of the golf and skating rink and some of the other enterprises.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I have for now. And just to close, I would prefer, when this vote comes up, I will be advocating for that $78,000 to go towards the library offset to get us closer to funding the amount. It might have been 270 or 280, 280,000 to get to alleviate that pressure of fear of losing the certification. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mayor, for your presentation, and Mike Gingras and Mary, thank you very much. Very professional and really a good snapshot of where we're at. I've had a lot of discussions with Mike and the mayor about the tax levy, and settling on $76, I believe, was the right choice. I was certainly pushing to have it lower because of the rainy day. It's pouring out, as the mayor said, but 76 was a good compromise. Mike, can you tell me, please, the number of commercial properties that we have in the city?
Sure, that's on page 16, 782.
Okay, and when a business goes out, the landlord is responsible, or the owner of the property is responsible for the property tax. We don't change our tax situation on a vacant building, correct? It's still paying whatever the property tax is.
That's correct. Whoever the owner is responsible.
And has there been a decrease in number of commercial properties or an increase, or is it pretty much the same over the last couple of years?
We have 700.
If it's commercial property, it stays a commercial property.
Right. According to this chart, we had 782 commercial properties this year, and the prior year we had 777, so it went up by 5.
Okay. Thank you. And Mayor, thank you for the assurance that whether we get the waiver from the state on our to us, you are, make us feel better that we will not lose whatever certification we have. Thank you. All set, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. So I was trying to jot down some questions as I was going, so it may be all over the place, but through you to Mr. Gingrich, Mike, one thing that just struck me as odd was the SESD refund that you have listed as $500,000. And I seem to remember last year we had some concern about claiming that $500,000 in the general fund, in the general budget, because we transferred everything to the Water Enterprise Fund. So technically that SESD refund doesn't go in our budget, it goes in the budget for Water Enterprise Fund. So I have some concerns about counting that money when it doesn't really belong there. Am I wrong on that?
Well, those funds received from SESD are unrestricted, but you are right that to keep things where they belong, they should go to the Water and Sewer Enterprise. But given the fact that the Water Sewer Enterprise looks like the revenues are going to come in strong this year, they won't be needing that funding, and the general fund or the tax rate could use it. But moving forward, I would like to move that to the Water and Sewer Fund.
Yeah, I'd also like to see that in the future also. I think that was the intent with the enterprise fund, to ensure that, you know, the money was going toward water and sewer infrastructure. But I do understand the situation we're in this year, so I'll move on from that. Another question I had, I was actually looking for this. I remember last year we made a transfer from the Health Insurance Trust Fund, and I think that was for about $500,000 to offset some health insurance costs. I don't see that listed anywhere. Do we not have any money left in the Health Insurance Trust Fund? Can we not utilize that money any further?
Yeah, that fund is dwindling. And it was a fund that would get replenished when we were self-insured, but we haven't been self-insured for a number of years. And I think it's in the $400,000 range now, and we use it to pay for a number of items still. There's a number of benefits that get paid through that fund. So I was hesitant to do anything with that at this time.
Okay, with regard to health insurance, where are we in that, Mike? Because I actually just forwarded the mayor something last week. The Blue Cross Blue Shield through the GIC actually issued a reimbursement to a lot of state agencies due to the fact that because of the pandemic, that health insurance costs were way down to them. And I know my company in particular, the Port Authority, just received a pretty significant refund from Blue Cross. Will cities and towns also see that type of refund? Have you heard anything like that?
So we're with the Maya Group for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and in July they gave us a 50% reduction in premium, and then that went back up to the normal rate. But we do anticipate rates holding or going into, we get our rates in around March for the next fiscal year. In the past, we've seen fairly significant increases. So I don't anticipate any increases. There may be some decreases in health insurance. But yeah, we did benefit from some lack of use for health insurance, and we were afforded a 50% credit for July.
Okay, thank you. My next question is regarding to the risks taken in the hotels taxes and meals taxes. I think you said it was about 25% reduction that you're counting in there. Is that correct?
Meals tax was 25 and hotels was 30.
Okay, and you see those numbers holding true? Because I don't see that in, personally, and you know, with air travel as it is, I don't see how we're even going to come close to the hotel numbers. at all. There's been no rebound on air travel at all. And, you know, the talk at Logan Airport is that we may get an influx of leisure travel, but, you know, business travel will likely not return for years. So I just wonder about taking such a risk on the hotel taxes, and I know the mayor said that you actually felt that this was less of a risk, but I wonder, you know, how did you arrive at that reduction, the 25 and 30%? Just
Because we did get 250,000 in, that was for April, May, and June. So multiply it times 4, there's $1 million. So I was hopeful that these numbers could hold, but as the mayor said earlier, these are a risk, and I'm sure that we're going to have to come back, and they may be offset by some other things that happen during the course of the year. But we'll be back in the spring and evaluating our snow and ice and other issues, and we'll have to address it at that time.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to respond to the question as well?
Yes, real quick, because that's a good question. And Councilor Turco, that's the one I'm most worried about, is the hotel. I feel like with the outdoor dining that we've allowed, that policy, and a lot of the meals being delivered through, you know, different variety of ways, you know, that the meals tax is a little less of a risk. And the landfill I feel okay about, but the hotel one is a lot up in the air, and you know this business better than anybody. So that is the one I feel most, I'm concerned about the most. So I think we're just gonna have to continue to watch that, but I think you hit it right, that's the one that is most concerning at this point.
thank you. And if there is a shortfall, that's additional monies that would need to come out of reserves to make up for that shortfall, unless we actually come in above and other funding mechanisms, I would guess.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And while I have you both, I guess I could ask to either one of you. The other concern I had was the mall. I know you gave them a significant, or I don't want to say significant, there was an abatement given to the mall. Was that a long-term contract or something that was done long-term through you to Mr. Gingrich, Mr. President? So did it account for this year, or was that just only last year?
That was last year. That was an abatement for last year.
And has the mall reached out to you, Mike, through you, Mr. President, for an additional abatement this year, and do you anticipate that they will?
I expect that they will be coming in, yes.
They come in every year.
Okay, with that said, do you recall the amount of the abatement you gave last year?
I think it was around 250,000.
Okay, so devil's advocate, if we had to do the same thing this year, and we only listed, what, $500,000 in abatements in this paperwork here, are we in the ballpark of where we need to be?
I have about 850,000 in the account, and then we'll add the 500. So we should be okay for the next year or so. We traditionally have about 450,000 in exemptions annually. That would leave us approximately 800,000 or 900,000 in the fund to handle large abatements, and as we anticipate a number of businesses that will be applying for relief.
Okay, Mike, and my last question to you, I do have one question for Ms. Antonellis, but my last question for you is much in line with what Council Manning was speaking of with the golf course. I don't recall over the last several years that the golf course has been profitable in any way. I think that they've gone to retained earnings each of the last couple fiscal years, and now retained earnings is at 0. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I think as of today, they're probably 200,000 into the black.
Into the red?
Sorry, Councilor.
Black, to the good.
Oh, I didn't mean, I'm sorry, did I misspeak? Did I say golf course? I meant the skating rink, my apologies. Skating rink.
Now the skating rink, before we did the renovation, would be able to maintain revenues against their budget. But the renovation brought on debt services of about 90,000 a year. And that additional 90,000 is something that really can't be covered through their operations. So I anticipate going forward, if they were fully operational, that the city would have to subsidize that debt service in order to balance their budget.
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't anticipate that the skating rink will be profitable in years to come in any way, shape, or form?
Not until their debt service is paid.
I'm sorry, Mike, your volume kind of went down.
Oh, not until their debt service is paid off.
And how much longer do we have on that debt service?
I want to say about 7 or 8 years.
Okay, so that, you know, again, it's amazing that Councilor Manning actually brought this up, but the mayor and I actually just had a discussion about the possibility of combining, you know, the golf course and the skating rink as basically a recreational enterprise fund instead of having two separate enterprise funds, so that we don't have to fund this through the budget. And I don't know if there's something that the council would consider, but being that the skating rink historically has lost money, and again, I'm not in favor of closing down. I think it's a source of pride that we have a skating rink and a golf course and 2 walking bike trails and 2 farms, and I think it's amazing credit to the city, but I do think that the skating rink needs to be addressed at some point because we can't continue to keep drawing money off of that while struggling to pay the budget for the library. So I just think it's something that this council needs to be cognizant of, in whichever way we need to do it, whether it's a tough decision or not. I don't believe that we just can keep funding the skating rink year after year with no hopes of maintaining a profit on it. Just a thought. Mike, thank you for everything. This is an excellent presentation, as always. Thank you to your whole team. And I have one question for Ms. Antonellis, if you don't mind, through you, Mr. President.
Ms. Antonellis.
Hi, Ms. Antonellis. Just one quick question. You mentioned last year that every 10 years you do in-person assessments for commercial properties. Was this supposed to be this year, or when does that?
It's an ongoing process. We do it cyclically. So basically, we are going out, we're in West Peabody at this point, going door to door, attempting to getting into properties, but it's all properties, not just commercial properties. And we do it over a 10-year period.
That includes residential properties also?
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought, see, I kind of was thinking back to last year, and I thought there were some questions about personal property for businesses, in that it's basically an honor system for them, where they send in a form that tells you what's on their property and
Right, that is business personal property, and that is done via a form of list that is submitted by the business annually.
Okay, and then I thought at that point you had mentioned that there's an actual physical verification every 10 years for that.
Correct. We do go out once every 10 years. But in the meantime, we send out the form, we send the information that we have on file that they are to update, add in new items, subtract items that they've disposed of. So that is done annually. But an actual canvassing is not done every year for every single
Okay,
property.
so that's the question. Maybe I misstated it, but that's the question I have. When will that canvassing be done for personal property?
It won't be done until 2024.
Okay, so we have another 4 years, because that would probably, just as they do an in-person assessment at my home, and my property value increases drastically, although I try to not let them in, but that always backfires. That will probably increase our commercial values slightly, or personal property values for commercial.
Yeah, and they fluctuate as businesses come into the city and as businesses leave. So it's constantly, we're keeping track by the business certificates that are taken out in the city clerk's office. So we attempt to get the new businesses and keep track of those that have moved out of the city or have closed. So it's a moving target.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Councilor O'Neill.
And thank you, President Rosignol. And I certainly want to echo other councilors' comments. I want to thank Mayor Betancourt for his presentation, and certainly echo the comments regarding the finance team throughout this, pandemic or current financial situation. They've been very transparent, not only to the city council, but to all the residents as we're going through this process of trying to make projections for revenue, shortfalls and estimates of what we're going to do. But I guess I want to just make a couple general comments and then also just ask one one question. I think I'll just speak that I certainly value the library. It's been brought up tonight, the shortfall that way, and commentary on the skating rink. This stuff all adds up into our budget and our costs of running the city. But as Mayor Betancourt pointed out, we've had all of the departments and services in the city have had to take haircuts, and some significant. That they're providing valuable services to the city, and due to the current financial situation, we've asked everyone to sacrifice. And certainly, I don't want to get into a choice of choosing the library versus senior citizens' meals and activities. It's just, we have to do, be very strict with our costs, but I think in some cases I don't want to choose one over the others. We have our whole budget that we have to do. What I'd say is, as we look at tonight, we've talked about it, we have a $3.6 million rounded deficit from the prior fiscal year that we're carrying forth, and I think it's prudent that we do take money out of our reserves. I think the recommendation is the $1.2 million rounded for this year. I guess the general question is that I wouldn't be comfortable, and I know that the rainy day fund or reserve fund is there for those purposes, these challenges, but given the fluidity of the current pandemic, we're still in it, the financial situation, we're making projections of revenue, and there's always that risk that we fall short through no fault of our own, and we may have another deficit through the current fiscal year. All that being aside, what is the current, estimate of any effect on our bond rating, our city's bond rating, with removing what we end up with for, the final free cash for, if we take money out of free cash that's being recommended tonight? Is there any effect that we expect from Moody's due to reducing our free cash amount? Either through the mayor, through Chairman, President Rosignol, either to the mayor or through Mike Gingras. Thank you.
Thank you. Another great question, and Mr. Gingras may want to add in. But certainly, our numbers our reserves have gone down a bit over the last few years as we've taken it out, I think, appropriately to try to help with our tax numbers and to help our residents. And we've also taken on a significant amount of debt over the last few years, primarily, again, because of the Higgins Middle School and some other projects, but primarily the Higgins Middle School. So because we've taken on a lot more debt and we've taken a little bit from our reserves, there has been a reduction in our bond rating from a few years ago. I expect that it's possible that, depending on where we land, once it's certified and we get our state numbers, that Moody's will review and see where we stand, and it's possible there could be another reduction. I'm a little less concerned about that at this moment. I've always been a big advocate of the reserves and keeping that a healthy number, because at the time I knew we were going to be borrowing for the middle school, and for those few years there was really a push to try to keep our reserves where they're at. I've been a little more comfortable over the last couple years in going forward. I don't see a major project to the magnitude of a Higgins Middle School coming down the pike in the very near future. Certainly we've had some projects, a water infrastructure project being a big one, but I feel a little bit better about where we stand in terms of our reserves and our bond rating, and I don't see on the horizon a big chunk of borrowing coming. And so that's kind of like my answer and my thought on it. Mr. Gingras, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and also I just want to add that, Peabody's not in a vacuum. I mean, we're going to be evaluated compared to other communities, and I think we've done a good job keeping a decent level of reserve and not overextending ourselves with debt. So it's really going to come down to the Moody's evaluation in comparison, or how Peabody compares with everyone else. And that's ever changing. All the standards and all the benchmarks and all the ratios are all different now with the COVID. So I'm not really sure how things are going to end up.
Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. No, thank you. Those are reasonable answers, and I know once again, there's no guarantee what the rating agency, obviously that would affect our ability to borrow money and do that. I guess just in general, obviously we have a challenge in the city, as does every other city and town in Massachusetts and across the country. And I think our approach or the recommended approach tonight is something that I can support. But I think it's been said tonight, this is a fluid situation and it may change, and we may have to come back in 6 months when we do our budget for the next fiscal year and look very hard at not only all the union contracts that are coming up and ask for more shared sacrifice across the city with our employees. It's not something that I like saying as an elected official, but that's the truth. We all have to continue evaluating, how what we have for our costs and ask everyone to continue to have some shared sacrifice. But thank you for the presentation tonight. I have no further questions at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gingras, I believe it's slide 9 of the presentation. By the way, overall, I just want to add to the comments already made, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Gingras, and the entire finance team. Thank you for all your efforts on this. Slide 9, that the $762,000, you explained, Mr. Gingras, during your presentation, how you got there and why why it only includes the general fund and the skating rink, and that makes sense to me. But you said you've been working with the Department of Revenue on this, and you have high confidence. I don't think you'd make a statement like that unless you thought that was pretty close to a sure thing. I mean, I know you can't make the commitment, and I promise I won't use your words against you, but I mean, this is going to make a significant difference in the overall picture here. So you feel as
Based on my correspondence with them, I feel that there's a way for us to justify our position with the water and the golf course, that we won't be required to add that to this tax calculations. And I would say I'm 98% confident, but I don't want to say 100%.
I understand, Mr. Gingras, but I know, being who you are in your approach to things, I'm glad to hear it's up in that 98% range. I mean, looking at the puts and takes on the local revenue numbers, when I look at the bottom line on that relative to June, we're really only off $78,000 at the bottom line from the June budget presentation. So, I mean, I definitely understand the risks that have been articulated, particularly with respect to the hotel number, and not to minimize that, but we've seen a few upsides here as well. That hold the potential to offset major portions of that. Fair enough, Mr. Gingras?
We're hopeful that we can offset some of those possible risks, yes.
Thank you. There was some commentary made about the, I think it might have been Councilor Manning Martin that made reference to the shift to the commercial side, which fair comments, but I think at the bottom of slide 12 there, I mean, we can see that since 2015, that percentage of the total has been pretty darn consistent in the you know, the 14, the low point was actually now, right? 14, just a hair over 14%, and the highest point was 15.02%. So I mean, that's a pretty steady percent of the total. And then if you look at slide 16, I mean, that translates to, you know, under these new rates, the way I read this, somewhere in the ballpark of 79% of CIP are going to pay less in fiscal.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yeah, thank
That's
you.
correct.
So, I mean, although the shift is real, the increases, you know, the majority of them are going to see decreases in the current fiscal year. When I look at this $76 number, and Mr. Mayor, you made some comments at the beginning about the June scenarios. I mean, I think that is very important information for people to understand, that's, you know, the range of possibilities at that time based on the number of assumptions, many of which you mentioned during your presentation, was the lowest possible increase that you could foresee at that time was $68.62, or 1.5%, and at the high end of the spectrum, we were staring down the possibility of a $279.20, or 6.2% increase. So we're coming in here at the low end of that range for sure, at $76 or 1.7%. So I mean, I do think that as things go these days, navigating our way through all the uncertainty, that's a pretty good outcome, more than a pretty good outcome. We look at the comparisons there on slide page 17. And the ones that we know, right, or that at least I know, based on what's been published in the newspapers, Beverly has come in at a $216 increase, and Salem has come in at a $144 increase. So roughly double Peabody's increase. They're at 2.4%. And, you know, I've heard the argument in the past that, you know, increases are increases, but I think you really do need to look at this comparative data, because, you know, you just need to look at how Peabody's doing relative to other area communities, and we just continue to perform quite well by that measure. Actually, you know, when I like to calculate the what the finance team here provides is kind of a blended number, but this matrix is all about single-family home rates and tax bills. So, you know, for comparative purposes, as I look at the numbers, on single family, the increase is around $61. So it's actually a bit better than the $76 number that includes, which includes some condominiums and 2 and 3 families in there versus a pure single family number. So, Mr. Gingrich, do you agree that it makes sense from an apples to apples comparison perspective to try to get to that single family number?
No, that makes sense, and I think if you talk to Susan, that the 2 and 3 families have increased in value, so they're going to skew the number a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, they do. I mean, you can kind of back into these numbers from the data in the presentation, but when you isolate single family, I see that as a $61 or 1.28% increase. So again, that only really has meaning in terms of this comparative data for Essex County. Mr. Chingers, in response to Councilor O'Neill's question about the bond rating, I guess this would go to either yourself or the mayor. I think one thing you might have left off is the impact that our excess levy capacity has. I mean, when you look at that number, last year's data, we're at 12 million, or in excess of 12 million, and this year you're projecting 16 million. I mean, nobody's even close. Nobody's even in the same ballpark in Essex County. So, I mean, can you just, I know the bond rating agencies don't necessarily view that in the same way that they view the reserve, but is it fair to say that it's still a significant consideration?
No, thank you for pointing that out. This is something that every time we interview with Moody's, we have to go through and emphasize and go over, and they truly do take it into consideration, and it really helps offset some of the wealth factors that we don't have in our community, and it kind of mitigates a little bit of the use of the reserves, because at the end of the day, they want to make sure as prospective bond buyers that Peabody's able to pay the bonds, and without having to go for a Proposition 2.5 override, and we have taxing capacity to do that. So it's hugely favorable when it comes to the bond rating, and just for the city itself for flexibility going forward. We keep tight budgets, we do the best we can, but in the event that we need to raise taxes, there's a mechanism to do so. You look at, as I talked about earlier, many of these communities, 5, 10, 20, 800,000, they can't raise any more taxes. Impossible.
Right, so, thank you, Mr. Chingers. So while you said, and I think you accurately said that Peabody's not in a vacuum with respect to drawing down reserves, we are clearly unique in this regard. So in a very positive way. I find this overall, the presentation and the recommendation to be in line with the low end, as I said, of what was projected in June. I also consider it to be in line with the October and November updates that your team provided, Mr. Mayor, to the Finance Committee. And again, I think overall well done, and I plan to support the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. McGinn.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Walton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Gingras, and your entire team for putting this together. It was very thorough, very easy to follow presentation, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership through this process, because I know it's been a very difficult year for everyone. I just had one quick question, and I know in previous updates we had talked about outstanding taxes. I'm particularly interested from the commercial side of things, from the close of FY 2020. Do you have an idea or a ballpark of what percentage of commercial taxes are not collected as of yet?
I have that in my email, but I haven't opened it right now. But I can get you that number.
Okay, and the reason I ask, I guess my follow-up to that would be, I know it's assumed that that revenue is going to come in at some point. You know, we've seen, even in this budget, we have the $470,000 allocation in interest fees and taxes from back taxes that were due on one particular property. So I know it's assumed from a revenue standpoint that it's going to come in. My question is, does that put us in a difficult position from a cash flow perspective, or is that something that we should be looking at based on how much has been collected so far for FY 2020?
You make a good point. The cash flow impact is something that we have to take a look at and be concerned with. From a revenue standpoint, the uncollected taxes are assumed collectible because we can lien the property. And given our free cash, that kind of offsets the cash flow issue. In other words, if we had $9 million of free cash and we didn't collect $1 million, we still have cash flow to work with.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. And also, I'd be curious if you could give us an update in terms of what is left in our reserve. I know we intend to, under this scenario, intend to take $1.5 million from the reserve, but could you give us an update with what's left?
Okay. That's another area of uncertainty. The state is backlogged with tax rates. They're not certifying free cash at this point. What they did is they authorized Peabody to use the amount that was left from June 30th of $9.5 million. And once we subtract $1.5 million and 78,000, we'd be at $7.9 million in free cash, $2.9 million in stabilization. So that would be 10.9, but that's not a firm number because it could go up or go down. I've submitted a great deal of forms and applications for free cash, and I'll be working with them over the next weeks, probably not till after the new year, once they get their tax rates done for all the communities, and we'll get a firm number and we'll have a better understanding of what it's going to be.
Great, thank you. And again, I think I speak on behalf of fellow councilors as well. We really appreciate your hard work on this and certainly know that there's a lot of variables that have been unforeseen and will continue to be unforeseen, and that there's a lot of back and forth to figure out these numbers, and that there's a lot of things that we want to see funded. You know, we've brought up the library and other initiatives, and it's just a matter of finding the revenue to do it. So certainly not an enviable position, Mr. Gindras, but thank you so much for your hard work and your dedication through this process. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilor Walton. Any further councilors wish to speak at this moment? Seeing no hands, I just had a couple of questions. First of all, thank you, Mr. Gingras. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for this presentation. Most of my questions have already been asked and answered. The two questions I did have remaining, and I know this is going to be fluid, and I know we've taken some risks. I'm assuming the rental fees is also one of the risks that we're taking, considering the current state of affairs. I know it's a small number, but I'm assuming, is that also a calculated risk that we're taking? Mr. Gingras?
Thank you. Let me get to that page.
Page 10.
The rental fees, those are generally our rental fees from AT&T for the microwave, not microwave, the cell towers.
So that's a fixed number?
It's a fixed number, yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Comes in that ballpark.
The only other question I had is regarding payment in lieu of taxes for nonprofits, hotels, and tax-exempt status. That number has basically been flat for 4 years, where we have raised commercial tax and we also have raised residential tax every year. How is that formulated and calculated annually for the pay in lieu of taxes?
Those are negotiated with different entities, and they're generally multi-year agreements. And actually, we were just going through some of those today, and some of those are coming due. And the assessor's office tracks these and works with these entities.
So you said they're working on those currently? Do you know
That's
roughly
correct.
how many of those are you looking at modifying if they're due?
I think if Susan's there, she could speak to that better.
Thank you.
If I could, Mr. President, and this is always a very tricky kind of negotiation with the different entities, the hospitals. And in fact, we got a check today for $85,000 from Leahy for the school-based health clinic at the high school. So I could speak in terms of Boston Children's and Leahy. We're in constant negotiation with them. They've been very generous with the student-based health center over at the high school and with some other needs that we have. We've gone to them a number of times, particularly over the last several months. So it's always a tricky negotiation with them, at least to those healthcare entities. Maybe Susan could speak to some of the others.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Concerning the payment in lieu of taxes, there is one that is expiring this year that we will need to renegotiate. And there's, I believe, 2 others that will be expiring in 2 more years that we will be renegotiating. But generally, they're for a certain term. And then there's typically increases built into the term, and at the expiration, then we meet again and negotiate another term.
Those terms, are they a set amount of years, or does it depend on the entity?
It all depends on the entity. Some pay a flat fee, some pay incrementally more over a number of years. It's just all a matter of the negotiation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Does any further councilors wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a number of motions that need to be made to close out these matters, most of which are statutorily required. Before I begin that process, I just, on Mr. Gingras, just want you to confirm something for the council. Item B in our package relates to the adoption of Chapter 126 of the Acts of 1988. I compared that to last year, and I found it to be identical. So we're just carrying forward the last year's exemptions.
That's correct. We're just going to adopt it.
Yeah.
Again, it's an annual adoption.
Yeah, I understand, but we haven't always done this one, so I want to make sure that councilors are clear that we did do it last year in these amounts, so. With that, Mr. President, I would I would move to adopt Chapter 126 of the Acts of 1988, optional additional real estate exemptions for 2021, as specified in the communication from His Honor the Mayor dated December 3, 2020. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move to approve the appropriation request from the unreserved fund balance free cash account number 100359001 in an amount of $1.5 million to the FY 2021 operating budget tax levy account number 100-39201 in an amount of $1.5 million. So moved.
I heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. On the motion, Councilor Sasslaw.
The only question I had is on communication F. It says $1 million in the verbiage. Is that a typo or am I missing something here?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that is a typo.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So it should say, obviously it should be 1.5 million again.
Correct.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Seeing no further questions, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve the appropriation request, unreserved fund balance free cash, account number 100-0000359001, in an amount of $78,000, to reserve fund FY 21 fiscal year 2021 budget, account number 43000031102, in an amount of $78,000. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
No.
Turco,
No.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-2.
Councilor McGinn.
Move to adopt a residential factor of 0.827082 for fiscal 2021, which is a 175% CIP. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Councilor McGinn, do we need to close the public hearing now, or could we do that after all these transfers? I don't think we've closed the public hearing.
I was going to wait until after the transfers. Councilor McGinn.
I just wanted to be sure for,
Yeah, I think procedurally, Councilor Turco has a great point, so I would move to close the public hearing.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn to close the public hearing. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vote to adopt, strike that. Move to adopt the deficit amortization schedule for fiscal year 2020. Deficits to defer up to $1,221,108.15 for fiscal year 2021, in accordance with the details attached to the communication from His Honor the Mayor dated December 3rd, 2020. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Minnie Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to not grant a discount for open space. So moved.
Heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manny Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to not adopt a residential exemption. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis, Manny Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to not adopt a small commercial exemption. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manny Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move to two other items here, but those are all the items related to tax classification. And I just want to remind the councilors that are present here this evening, and ultimately the councilors that are involved by remote participation, that they need to sign the classification tax allocation form. So if we can gather as many of those signatures tonight as possible, and then as soon as possible for those remote.
Councilor McGinn.
It's page 2, Councilor Melville. Mr. President, move to approve the appropriation request from Receipts Reserve Cable Fund, account number 270-0000-33017, in an amount of $214,352.83 to Cable Fund expense, $270,000, I'm sorry, strike that. Cable Fund expense, account number 270-0000-53007, in an amount of $214,352.83. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Mitsoulas,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Manny Martin,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gingrich, can you just comment on the late receipt for so that there's clarity with the council, this is the communication from His Honor the Mayor dated November 6th about the Ride Share Transportation Enhancement Trust.
Yes. This is money the city receives from the Uber and Lyft payments. And before December 31st, the city has to declare to the state the purpose of this, the use of these funds, and show an appropriation by the city council for adoption of use of the funds.
Thank you, Mr. Gingras.
Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mayor Betancourt. Mayor, I understand that this rideshare transportation enhancement trust comes with a restriction that the funds be used for improvements on a city's transportation network. Is there a definitive definition of city's transportation network other than bridges, buses, railroads, and tunnels? Is it really, how much of a restriction is on these monies from Lyft?
Yes, that's one we've struggled with to try to get a real definition as to what we can use this for. It has to be transportation related, as you mentioned. You know, we've looked at different options to see if it could go to busing in the schools and some other things that certainly would help. But it's right now we've been informed that we have to narrowly. So I think you and I we're probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I thank you. I was thinking if there was any wiggle room to get it over to the Council on Aging to increase their transportation for seniors and disabled, but that's too much wiggling.
Yeah, I think we'll try again for future years on that, but right now we haven't been able to get that.
Okay, thank you, because you did mention the great work that they are doing down there, keeping up with essential services and rides and providing meals, but the extra rides that aren't being given now are so essential to those that are isolated, that are disabled, and seniors. And given this pandemic is going on so long, they're really isolated. And any type of boost we can give to the Council on Aging to provide more transportation, that's what I was hoping to squeeze out of this. But if you can keep it in mind moving forward, if we can try to provide them some relief, that would be great. Thank you.
That's a great point, Councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Melville.
I would just like to echo those thoughts as well. This is actually, the Council on Aging runs a ride-hailing service, I mean, essentially, with providing rides and whatnot. So I would assume that it would fall into that. And I would also say in the future, we could look at doing some, and I've talked about this in the past, this is not the year, and I don't even think next year would be the year for it, just with the city's needs, but setting up within downtown Peabody areas to actually be able to use one of the ride-hailing services to be pick up, drop off safely, with they're not stopping in the in a lane, people jumping in and out. That's an issue that's becoming a problem throughout the state. Not an issue right now, but something we could look at in the future. But I definitely think the Council on Aging would be an appropriate place for this going forward as well. So thank you.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to approve the appropriation request, Rideshare Transportation Enhancement Trust, account number 250-0000-35835, an amount of $31,179.70. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, roll call vote.
Councilors Welton.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further motions.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. Roll call vote.
Councilors Welton.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Turco.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
Melville. McGinn.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Thank you all.
Thank you, council, for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.